I never thought my wedding day would be remembered for my mother's dramatic revelation instead of my vows. But looking back now, maybe it was always meant to happen that way. My name is Ellie, and 6 months ago, I stood in a renovated barn in the Berkshires, wearing the dress I had saved for years to buy, surrounded by everyone I loved. It was supposed to be perfect, the Pinterest wedding I'd planned down to the lavender sprigs in the centerpieces. Then my mother decided it was the perfect moment to stand up and reveal the secret she'd been holding on to for 30 years. Right there, between the toasts and the cake cutting, in front of my new in-laws, my childhood friends, and my father's entire side of the family. I can still hear the gasps echoing through the rafters. I can still see my husband's face, frozen in confusion. And I can still feel that burning humiliation crawling up my neck as 200 pairs of eyes turn to stare at me. But here's the thing about family secrets. They only have power when they stay buried. And what my mother didn't realize when she grabbed that microphone was that she wasn't destroying my wedding day. She was finally setting me free. If you're dealing with toxic family members or wondering how to reclaim your story, hit subscribe. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. My father was a respected dentist, my mother a part-time real estate agent with a flair for hosting dinner parties that were the talk of our neighborhood. My younger sister Amber and I were honor roll students, competitive swimmers, and we always had the most elaborate Halloween costumes on the block. But behind our colonial-style front door with its seasonal wreaths, things were different. My mother, Diana, was the undisputed ruler of our household, a woman who wielded perfectionism like a weapon. Everything had to be just right. Our grades, our appearance, our achievements. Nothing was ever good enough, especially not for me, her firstborn. I remember my Sweet 16 party where she'd insisted on a specific shade of blue for the decorations. When the cake arrived with navy instead of periwinkle frosting flowers, she berated the caterer so severely that the woman left in tears. I spent the rest of my birthday celebration watching my friends exchange uncomfortable glances while my mother complained about incompetent services to anyone who would listen. Then there was my high school graduation dinner at Marcello's, the fanciest Italian restaurant in our town. I'd received a partial scholarship to Boston University, not the full ride to Harvard my mother had expected. Throughout the entire meal, she kept saying things like, "Well, BU is a perfectly adequate school for someone with Ellie's capabilities." My father just sipped his wine and changed the subject, while Amber stared at her plate. That was our family dynamic. My mother's cutting remarks, my father's avoidance, my sister's silence, and my desperate attempts to finally earn approval that never came. When I met Ryan during my junior year of college, I was drawn to his warm, chaotic family of 5, with their loud holiday gatherings and genuine affection. His parents argued openly, but made up just as quickly. They celebrated achievements, big and small. They didn't use love as currency. When we got engaged after 4 years together, I was thrilled, but terrified about blending our families. My mother initially seemed supportive, offering to contribute to the wedding fund, her grand gesture that surprised everyone, including my father. But there were conditions. She would help pay only if she had significant input on the venue, the guest list, the menu. I reluctantly agreed, desperate for this one day to be perfect, for our families to blend without incident. What I didn't know then was that my mother had recently discovered something that would change everything. A secret she'd kept buried since before I was born. One involving my father, a woman named Carolyn from his dental school days, and a decision that had shaped our entire family without any of us knowing. A secret she had been nursing like a wound, waiting for the perfect moment to weaponize it. The week before the wedding was a blur of last-minute details and family arrivals. Ryan's parents flew in from Chicago and stayed at the bed and breakfast near our venue. His brothers and their families trickled in over the next few days, filling our small town with unfamiliar faces that would soon be my family. My father was unusually quiet, working extra hours at his practice to cover for the days he'd miss. My mother, however, was everywhere, checking table arrangements, arguing with the florist about the exact shade of the peonies, critiquing the calligraphy on the place cards I'd spent weeks perfecting. 3 days before the ceremony, we held the rehearsal dinner at Riverdale Farm, a renovated dairy barn with string lights and exposed beams. It was the first time both extended families would meet, and my stomach was in knots. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table as my father gave a surprisingly emotional welcome speech. Then my mother stood up, champagne flute in hand, her emerald dress catching the light. "I have always wanted the best for my Ellie," she said, her voice carrying that familiar edge that made me tense up, even when she didn't know what was best for herself. She went on to tell the story of how I'd wanted to go to art school, but she'd guided me toward a business degree instead. "And look how well that turned out," she said with a tight smile, as Ryan's artist brother shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Throughout the dinner, I noticed her drinking more than usual, pulling my father aside for tense whispers, then returning to the table with an increasingly brittle smile. At one point, she cornered Ryan's mother by the dessert table. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Mrs. Johnson's face fall, then harden. When Ryan asked what happened, his mother just shook her head and said, "Nothing, honey, just getting to know Diana." The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, that perfect New England fall day every bride dreams of. The bridal suite was chaotic, my bridesmaids laughing, music playing, mimosas being passed around. My sister was adjusting my veil when my mother entered, already dressed in her silver mother-of-the-bride gown that had required 5 separate shopping trips. "I need to speak with Ellie," she announced, alone. Something in her tone silenced the room. My friends exchanged glances before filing out, Amber squeezing my shoulder as she left. When the door closed, my mother's composure cracked slightly. "Are you absolutely sure about this marriage?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. "Mom, what are you talking about? Of course I'm sure." I was trying to stay calm, to not let her ruin this day like she'd ruined so many others. "You don't know everything about marriage, about family," she continued, pacing the small room. "There are things you should know before you make this commitment." "Whatever it is, it can wait," I said firmly, turning back to the mirror. "Today is not about your issues with Dad, or with me, or with anyone. It's my wedding day." Something flickered in her eyes then, hurt, anger, determination. "Fine," she said after a long pause. "Have it your way. You always do these days." She left without another word, and I tried to shake off the encounter as pre-wedding jitters. The ceremony went perfectly. Ryan's vows made me cry. The autumn leaves provided a stunning backdrop for photos, and even my father seemed relaxed for once, laughing with Ryan's dad about some shared golf anecdote. As we moved into the reception, I started to believe we'd made it, that the day would pass without incident. My mother had been surprisingly subdued, almost distant throughout the cocktail hour. I should have recognized that strange calm for what it was, the eye of the hurricane. During dinner, after my father and Ryan's parents had given their speeches, the DJ announced it was time to cut the cake. Ryan and I were standing by the 3-tiered creation, knife in hand, when my mother abruptly approached the DJ's table and whispered something. He looked confused but handed her the microphone. "Before the happy couple cuts the cake," she said, her voice echoing through the barn, "I think there's something everyone here should know." The room fell silent. Ryan's hand tightened around mine. And in that moment, looking at my mother's face, I knew exactly what was about to happen, and that I was powerless to stop it. "I've been keeping a secret for 30 years, my mother continued, her voice steady despite the champagne I'd watched her consume. "A secret that Ellie's father made me promise never to reveal." The room grew so quiet, you could hear the autumn leaves rustling outside. My father half rose from his seat, his face drained of color. "Diana, don't," he said, but it came out as a hoarse whisper that barely carried. She ignored him, her eyes fixed on me. "Ellie isn't your biological daughter, Richard. She's Carolyn Westfield's child, your girlfriend before me. The woman who left you, left her baby, and disappeared to California." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The knife slipped from my hand, clattering against the cake stand. "I raised you as my own," she continued, now addressing me directly. "Ellie isn't your biological daughter, Richard. She's Carolyn Westfield's child, your girlfriend before me. The woman who left you, left her baby, and disappeared to California." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The knife slipped from my hand, clattering against the cake stand. "I raised you as my own," she continued, now addressing me directly. "I took you in when your real mother abandoned you. I gave up my dreams, my career, to be a mother to someone else's child. And how have you repaid me? By always pulling away, always looking at me like I wasn't enough." The room started spinning. Ryan's arm went around my waist, steadying me. Through the blur, I saw my father moving toward my mother, his face twisted with rage and shame. "I sacrificed everything for this family," my mother was saying, her voice rising. "Everything. And now you're joining another family, looking at his mother like she's the mother you always wanted." She gestured wildly toward Ryan's stunned parents. "Well, now everyone knows the truth. Now everyone can see what I've been dealing with all these years." Something snapped inside me then. A lifetime of walking on eggshells, of never being good enough, of feeling like there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made my own mother unable to love me unconditionally. I stepped forward, away from Ryan's protective embrace. "Is that why?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "Is that why nothing I ever did was enough for you? Because I wasn't really yours?" The microphone picked up every word, broadcasting my question to the silent crowd. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother falter. "That's not... I didn't mean... You took in a child who wasn't yours, and then punished her for it every day of her life." I turned to face our guests. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this. Apparently, my mother thought my wedding day was the perfect time to let me know I was adopted." I locked eyes with my father, who looked utterly destroyed. "Is it true?" He nodded once, his eyes filling with tears. "Yes," he said softly. "But Ellie, you have to understand." I cut him off with a raised hand. I couldn't bear to hear explanations, not in that moment, not in front of everyone. I turned back to my mother, who was still clutching the microphone, her triumph fading as she registered the room's reaction. Not the scandal she'd anticipated, but horror at her cruelty. "Thank you for clarifying why I never felt like I belonged," I said. "You've given me a wedding gift I never expected. The truth, finally. And freedom from trying to earn your love." I walked toward the exit, past the stunned faces of our guests. Ryan immediately followed, along with my sister and my closest friends. As I reached the door, I heard my father's voice, raw with emotion, addressing the crowd. "My wife is unwell. Please forgive this interruption. Ellie is my daughter in every way that matters." I didn't turn back to see my mother's face, but the silence that followed his statement told me everything I needed to know. The power dynamic had finally shifted, and for once, she was the one standing alone, exposed, while everyone stared in judgment. Outside, in the crisp October air, I collapsed onto a bench, shaking uncontrollably. Ryan knelt in front of me, his hands warm on mine, while my sister paced furiously, phone in hand. "I'll call the coordinator. We'll clear everyone out," she was saying. "This is absolutely insane, even for Mom." My best friend, Jess, appeared with a bottle of whiskey she'd snagged from the bar. "Medicinal purposes," she said, offering it to me. I took a long swig, feeling the burn down my throat, grounding me back to reality. "Did you know?" I asked my sister. She shook her head vehemently. "No, God, no, Ellie. I had no idea." Within minutes, Ryan's parents joined us, his mother immediately wrapping me in a hug that smelled of her signature Chanel perfume. "You don't have to go back in there," she whispered. "We can end this right now." But something in me refused to let my mother's revelation be the final word on my wedding day. "No," I said, standing up. "I'm not leaving. This is still our day." As we strategized, my father appeared, looking 20 years older than he had that morning. "Ellie," he said, his voice breaking, "please, can I speak with you?" Ryan squeezed my hand and stepped away, giving us privacy. My father's confession came pouring out, how he'd been engaged to Carolyn in dental school, how she'd gotten pregnant but then panicked about motherhood weeks before I was born, how she'd left me with him and disappeared to start a new life, how he'd met my mother shortly after, a young woman who agreed to marry him and raise me as her own. "She did love you, Ellie," he insisted, "in her way, but it was always complicated for her. She never bonded with you the way she did with Amber. I should have done more, should have gotten her help years ago." As he spoke, the pieces of my childhood clicked into place. The emotional distance, the impossibly high standards, the subtle favoritism toward my sister. It wasn't my fault. It had never been my fault. While we talked, Ryan's brothers had taken charge inside, announcing to the guests that we were having a brief family moment and cranking up the music. By the time we returned, the dance floor was full, people tactfully pretending nothing had happened. My mother was nowhere to be seen. My father had asked his brother to drive her home. The wedding fund check she'd given us as her grand gesture was still valid, already deposited and spent. The irony wasn't lost on me. Over the next few hours, I danced with Ryan, cut our cake, and tried to salvage what remained of our celebration. Several older relatives pulled me aside to awkwardly express their support, while others pretended nothing had happened. Ryan's family closed ranks around me with a protectiveness that brought me to tears more than once. Later that night, in our hotel room, still in my wedding dress, I searched Carolyn, Westfield, California on my phone while Ryan was in the shower. I found her almost immediately, a real estate agent in San Diego, her professional headshot showing a woman with my exact same eyes and chin. Without overthinking, I sent her a message through her business contact form. "I think you might be my birth mother. My name is Ellie Davidson. I just found out today." The weeks following the wedding were chaotic. We postponed our honeymoon to deal with the fallout. My father came to our apartment almost daily, bringing old photos, my original birth certificate, letters Carolyn had written him years ago. My sister vacillated between rage at our mother and a complicated grief for the family dynamic she'd always known. My mother refused to speak to anyone, locking herself in the master bedroom of their home. Until, surprisingly, 2 weeks after the wedding, she called me. "I'm starting therapy," she said without preamble when I answered. "Your father is making me. He says it's therapy or divorce." Her voice had none of its usual sharpness. She sounded smaller, older. "I think that's good, Mom," I replied, the word mom feeling strange on my tongue now. "I'm seeing someone too." There was a long pause. "I did love you," she finally said. "I just didn't know how." It wasn't an apology, but from her, it was monumental. 3 days later, I received an email from Carolyn Westfield. She was shocked, emotional, eager to meet. She'd never had other children. She'd thought of me often, but had convinced herself I was better off without her disrupting my life. We arranged to meet when Ryan and I finally took our honeymoon to California in December. When we did, the resemblance was startling. Not just physically, but in mannerisms, in the way we both talked with our hands, in our shared love of spicy food that had always puzzled my family. She was warm, artistic, and deeply remorseful. She shared her own complicated story of postpartum depression in an era when it was barely recognized, of feeling utterly incapable of motherhood at 22. As winter turned to spring, new family configurations emerged. My mother continued therapy, slowly developing a more honest relationship with my father. My sister became my fiercest protector, insisting that nothing had changed between us. Carolyn and I exchanged weekly emails, building a relationship without the weight of daily parenting expectations. And Ryan's family embraced me completely, his mother teaching me their holiday traditions with a patience that sometimes made me cry. The money my mother had contributed to our wedding, her grand gesture that came with so many strings, we decided to use partly to fund a trip for Ryan and I to explore my newfound genetic heritage. Carolyn's DNA test had revealed Irish and Eastern European Jewish ancestry I've never known about, connecting me to a history that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. 6 months after my wedding day, I've come to realize that my mother's public humiliation attempt didn't destroy me or my marriage. It cracked open a lifetime of secrets and allowed light into places that had festered in darkness. The truth, as painful as it was, became the unexpected gift that freed us all from the roles we'd been trapped in for decades. Looking back at that moment in the barn, when my whole world shifted on its axis, I realize now it was exactly what needed to happen. My mother thought she was taking something from me, my perfect day, my sense of identity, my place in our family. Instead, she gave me the key to understanding my entire life. Today, I'm building new relationships on foundations of truth rather than obligation. I'm discovering parts of myself I never understood before. And I'm learning that family isn't just about blood or legal documents. It's about who shows up for you, who sees you clearly, who loves you without conditions. If you're struggling with family secrets or relationships built on shaky foundations, remember that sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most authentic healing. The truth really can set you free, even when it comes wrapped in someone else's cruelty. If this story resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And let me know in the comments if you've ever had a family secret come to light in a dramatic way. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these complicated family journeys is the first step toward making peace with our past. Thanks for listening to my story.